Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from whichever part of the world you are. Thank you so much for taking out time to attend this webinar that is brought to you by CHRMP. CHRMP stands for Certified Human Resource Management Professional. CHRMP is a globally recognized HR certification. CHRMP is a competency-based certification, which is very, very important. Anybody who has seen evolution of HR from task-based to skill-based to competency-based would understand how processes have been redefined. In fact, departments have been renamed from training and development to learning and development to talent development, or from recruitment and selection to talent acquisition, in the process of choosing competency-based way of doing and implementing human resource. So CHRMP is a competency-based HR certification. We are talking about 5,600 test centers in about 190 countries, certification partner being Pearson VUE, and we are talking about more than 10,000 strong alumni base, right? If you ever go to LinkedIn, just go there and type CHRMP. You'll be able to see CHRMPians working in different parts of the world in the best companies and Fortune 500, a lot of other companies that people long to work for, right? My name is Animesh Rai. I head the training and certification vertical for CHRMP globally. I come with about 17 years of work experience in human resource management. I have consulted number of Fortune 10, number of Fortune 500 companies in terms of setting up their HR processes, their HR systems, and I would be leading the discussion today on the topic of succession planning, right? And as I said, by end of this webinar, I promise that you would have a thorough understanding of how succession planning is done, which is very, very important. I think one of the important key element in terms of how business continuity principles are followed and HR participates in it, and how strategic HRs go about running and implementing processes and systems. Succession planning becomes an integral part of that. And today, I think we would be investing time in understanding what are the ways succession planning can be done. Not only that, I would also talk a bit about where the future of human resource is leading us. What you will see in next 5 to 10 years is something that I would quickly do a cap on, so that you understand where you fit in and how you fit in and how things would move ahead, right? Wonderful. With this note, let's quickly start. And before I start, I always start my webinars by first bursting some myths, right? These myths are important to burst because a lot of times I've seen HR professionals, I've seen HR executives, I've seen people who are looking at getting to human resource limit themselves with these myths, right? They tend to see these as issues, these as problems, and they're not able to make an informed decision because of these myths. So very, very important that we go ahead and talk about it. But before that, let me do a quick check with all of you. All of you are able to see me, all of you are able to hear me, and all of you are able to see my screen. A quick yes on the chat box would be wonderful. A quick yes on the chat box, please. Thank you so much for that quick yes. That's wonderful. So let's go ahead with talking about HRM myths. And when we talk about these myths, I think first is that a lot of people feel that human resource is largely an administrative role. It is a support function. There is no doubt about that it's a support function, but to see that it is only an administrative role would be wrong. HR has evolved from file management to personal management to human resource management to strategic human resource management, right? And when we talk about areas like HRBP, human resource business partner, where organizations are restructuring their departments, to HR analytics, I think HRs today are helping organizations make much better decisions, which is very, very important, right? And it has gone way beyond what an administrative role may look like, right? And it's important for us to understand, because it's good news for all of us who are enthusiastic, who are passionate about making a career in human resource management, because we have a larger role, a larger say in how organizations run HR as a department, as a function. And not only that, what they are able to achieve through that is something that also gets taken care of. So very, very important for us to understand that HR is not necessarily an administrative function, right? Second, I think one thing that a lot of HR professionals have gone about asking me when I have been part of webinars, or when I have been part of panel discussions, and when I have been part of these big meetups, is that uh, 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 you they need to be in a specialist vertical, so to be part of strategic human resource management, right? So yes, we have always seen that a lot of people are very enthusiastic about being part of general HR, or what you call as HR generalist, and anybody who has been guiding, a lot of HR professionals who have been guiding the subordinates or next gen HRs, they say that it's always good to know what's happening in entire HR, and there is no doubt about that. However, we have to also understand that both specialist as well as generalist functions are key to how organizations go about evolving and implementing HR processes and systems. Specialist, yes, does play a strategic role, but if you look at let's say a L&D specialist, then largely the role that the person would be playing would be an area of L&D. However, when you talk about human resource business partner kind of a role, which is not exactly a generalist role, you have to interact with a lot of specializations and go about solving human resource problems that organizations face, which again is very, very interesting, which again has a growth, a career of its own. And the way you go about planning and implementing that career is also very, very interesting, because you not only get overall exposure, what also happens is that you understand the technicalities and specialist technicalities for different verticals in human resource, in terms of catering to growth, catering to support, catering to uh, productivity, catering to better responses, catering to how exactly better processes and systems in an organization can be created and can be implemented, right? And the third myth that you have to think of is, we are talking a lot about AI and ML, right? We are talking a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And a lot of times what happens is, when we are talking about AI and ML, people feel that a lot of jobs in human resource may be lost because of AI and ML. And this largely corresponds to our fear in terms of how technology is changing the landscape, right? For example, 2 years back when I was in Amsterdam, I saw a bridge which was 16 feet long, which was printed out of a 3D printer. And that was a possibility, right? So there is a possibility that if you look at the niche new cities that are being planned in cities like Dubai, or in countries like Saudi Arabia, we are talking about these smart cities where we are talking about a 100-story building being printed out of a 3D printer in patches and being put across. So we always feel that what if this kind of loss of jobs may impact almost all the jobs in human resource. But let me tell you that yes, to an extent, I would say that old jobs may become redundant. A lot of jobs, for example, one area where there are a lot of jobs in human resources is recruitment. And when we talk about recruitment, there is a lot of matching of profiles and sourcing, etc., that HR professionals do. That may be story of past and times to come, because an AI or an ML system can wonderfully do it with better accuracy than an HR professional. But then there would be new roles that would come across, right? And every time there is a technological intervention in the world, people always fear that jobs would be lost. It was the same when computers were introduced. A lot of people were saying computer being introduced in terms of would take away a lot of banking jobs, etc. But new set of jobs emerged, and new set of roles emerged. The same thing is true for human resource as well. And in fact, I would talk about it in detail towards the end. So stay tuned till then. And also I have a wonderful surprise towards the end. So everyone who is with me till the end would have a wonderful New Year's gift for them. All right. So this is myth 3 that I wanted to quickly burst. And now let's come to the topic of succession planning, right? A lot of times, succession planning looks like a very important aspect in human resource management. No doubt it is, right? And a lot of times people feel that how do we go about doing succession planning? In fact, a lot of organizations that we have closely worked with, or a lot of organizations whom we have gone about consulting, we have seen that succession planning is largely gut based, right? It is largely based on what people feel may be right, or people feel who may be the successor. Not only that, a lot of times organizations also have this issue where they have actually not identified who would succeed a particular designation, and this has led to tragedies in corporate world, right? For example, if you look at Tata's, right, we did not have somebody who could replace Ratan Tata, and Tata's being such a big conglomerate and such a big group of companies had to suffer because maybe the way they wanted the succession planning to run did not work well, right? And so it's very, very important for us to understand that succession planning is uh, uh, niche in human resource. It is part of strategic HR in human resource, and it has to be done very, very carefully. And today, we would be digging deeper in terms of how do we go about implementing and doing succession planning in different organizations. Wonderful. Now, with this, let's first talk about which roles need succession planning, right? That is extremely important for us to understand, because a lot of times in my discussion, in my interaction with HR professionals, I've gone about seeing that succession planning is, they say that, okay, let's do succession planning for every role, right? But truly speaking, when we talk about an organization, you do not need succession planning for all roles. Remember, you need succession planning for critical roles. And this is part of the business continuity principle that I'm talking about. Critical roles, right? So if you can see that yellow bulb, right, it's a critical role that we are talking about. And what you need to do is first, the step one, the first step in succession planning is to identify what a critical role is. And when we talk about identifying a critical role, I think there are three questions that we need to ask. Three very, very important questions that we need to ask of succession planning: which roles need it, right? And when we talk about succession planning, which roles need it, we are talking about the first question being, what is the cost of mistake in this role, right? So let me give you an example. For example, let's say there is a technical support representative, and the technical support representative, or let's say a customer service representative, and the person is a telecom customer service representative, let's say Vodafone or Airtel customer service representative, and we are talking about somebody having a issue with let's say mobile network, etc., and they call, and then they have a bad experience with customer service representative. The cost of that mistake is much lesser compared to a customer support representative in a bank which handles high net worth individuals, right? For example, there may be a bank where they are handling celebrities, they are handling high net worth individuals, and if a mistake is done for a mobile or a customer care for a telecom company versus a customer service for a celebrity management or a high net worth individual, it's completely different. You may lose a HNI customer, you may lose a celebrity who's your client, right? And this would mean that the role that you need to do succession planning are the one where cost of mistakes are high, right? So first question that you need to ask is, what is the cost if a mistake happens in this role, which is very, very important. The second, and why is that also? Because if you have to be careful about that, of who's succeeding. If you're not careful about that, the chances, the probability of mistakes happening would be more, right? So to reduce that, I think this is an important question to ask, right? The second question to ask is how difficult it is to replace people in this role, again, which is very, very important question to ask, right? Now, there may be some designations which is easy to fill in. There are designations which are tough to fill in. There are designations which are tough to fill in. At the same time, the cost of making mistakes is high, and at the same time, it is directly in line with the goal achievement for the organization, right? So if we are talking about difficulty in replacing people, which technically means that you need succession planning for that. For example, if somebody is a world famous surgeon and he is working closely or part of a hospital chain, if the surgeon is a brand himself and he quits and leaves, then finding a replacement for a brand would be very, very difficult, isn't it? Right? Or finding a replacement in situations like this would be very, very difficult, right? Or to take a simpler example, we have been hearing about 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, right? Now imagine if there is a 5G research specialist or a 6G research specialist, then probably finding a replacement for a 6G or a 7G research specialist might be really, really difficult. And because world over, you can count them in maybe in 2 or 3 digits, right? So if we are talking about a 3 or 4 digit calculation for these set of people world over, then certainly it's very difficult to find and also crucial. So you cannot let go, and you need to do succession planning for these roles, right? And the third question that you need to ask is, how closely is this role tied to success of our business strategy, which is again very, very important, right? So when goal setting happens, whether you do it through OKR process, whether you do it through balanced scorecard, or whichever method do you go about using, and when you go about creating your goals, when you go about creating your strategy, and when we go about defining roles which are directly lined or in line with these strategies, I think these roles are the roles which are important, and these are the roles which have to be considered when we talk about succession planning, which is very, very important. 3 very important questions to ask as we talk about succession planning, which is very, very important for all of us, right? Okay, wonderful. Now, once we are clear with that a particular role needs succession planning, the moment we have this clarity, I think the step 2 applies. And step 2 of succession planning is mapping of 2Ps, right? The 2P rule, right? The 2P rules is about succession planning being measured or mapped to performance and to potential, to performance and to potential, right? Performance and potential, the 2P golden rule for succession planning has to be followed, performance and potential. So now when we talk about performance and potential, let's first understand what is performance. I think performance is something that is about successful achievement of goals, right? And when you say successful achievement of goals, it can be anything. It can be completion of a project or a program. It can be a particular milestone that has been set, it being achieved. It is about reaching a goal that was set. It is about maybe a set of KPIs or KRAs or KPAs which were set, and that needs to be tracked. So whatever we are talking about, whether it's objectives being met, whether it's key results being met, whether it's performance indicators being met, whether it's KPIs being met, when you are going about successfully completing that, I think it is about accomplishing performance. It is about accomplishing performance. Most of the evolved organizations, most of the set organizations have a very, very well-defined performance management system. And just in case if the performance management system is not very well-defined, still there are performance mechanisms which are very, very visible or seen. And if that is something that has been approved of, seen of, it's exceptional, it's understood that performance has happened, right? So one thing about when we talk about the 2Ps, performance, most of the time you would see is either very, very visible, very, very seen, highly measurable, organizations creating, setting their entire performance management systems in terms of tracking, mapping, etc. on that. And that is how you go about measuring performance. When we come to potential, I think potential is not, it does not have current data, right? It is about expected outcomes, right? It is about expected outcomes. It is about do individuals have the quality or the ability, which if developed, which is seen and which is visible, and which is in line with what you want, and which if developed can lead to future success of organizations, right? Or some kind of usefulness, right? So when we talk about potential, it is about gauging, mapping, measuring capabilities, right? If you have heard of assessment centers, etc., they go about tracking potential of people so that you can map them with future leaders in the organization, and you can go about then building these people to successfully be there in case of contingencies, right? So potential is about qualities and abilities and competencies that can be identified, which are in line with the role that you are planning for in terms of succession planning, right? Now, when we talk about where do we get performance data, we get performance data through appraisals data that is happening through annual performance review, through quarterly performance review, to half yearly performance review. So all this data that we are talking about in terms of performance is largely you arrive at here. So if I have to do succession planning, or if you have to do succession planning in your organization, one data that we are looking at is performance data. And when we are looking at performance data, we are largely going about looking at appraisal data or annual performance review data. And that is something that is good enough in terms of us understanding how exactly we would go about having this input, right? The second input that we need to have is about potential data. And when we talk about having potential data, I think we have not seen performance. So we are not aware of what has been the achievement level of individuals in your organization, right? So how do we then gauge that? So earlier, there was not such sound methodologies about going about measuring that. But if you now look at elements like assessment centers, if you look at critical incident methodologies, if you look at 360-degree feedbacks, I think we have much better data to make intelligent decisions, right? For example, if I take an example of assessment centers, it goes about creating an entire ambience of how people would display competencies that are needed to achieve job performance at various levels, right? And this is tried and tested in an ambience in a controlled way where this can be identified and it can be trusted, right? So I would not say that we can be 100% because we're dealing with humans, but at the same time, we do not have an alternative which is better than this, right? So if performance is something which is actual, or I would say factual, potential may be, I would not call it imaginary, but it is something that is not seen. But at the same time, elements like assessment centers, 360 and critical incident ensures that you have substantial information and data to make intelligent decisions in terms of potential of people, right? Now, remember, when it comes to giving them weightage and weighing scale, right? Performance always, and especially current performance, should be the driving factor, which means if you're giving weightage to potential and performance, and you want to consider performance to be 60 or 70% in that entire weightage, and especially you would not look at historical performance, you would look at current performance, right? And that's why if you look at sports, which is very competitive, you see big names being dropped out of teams only because of current performance, right? So current performance is a driving factor. It's a driving factor in terms of succession planning, which is very important. So remember, you need to look at performance. Historical, empirical data may be important, but what would you want to connect to or give more weightage is current performance along with potential, right? Now, once we have this data, we have gotten appraisal data, we have performance management system data, we have assessment center data, we have 360-degree feedback, critical incident, etc., and we have seen current performance, we go about mapping it, right? And we go about mapping in a graph of potential versus performance, right? So we create a 2P graph, which is potential versus performance, which is divided into 9 criterias, right? And what are these 9 criterias? The 9 criteria range from low performer, low potential to high performer, high potential. And in between, if you look at, you have low performer, moderate potential, and you have low performer, high potential, and you have moderate performer, low potential, and you have high performer, but low in potential, and you have moderate performer, moderate potential, and you have high performer, moderate potential, and you have moderate performer, high potential, and then finally we have high performer, high potential. So if you look at the increasing graph of performance and the increasing graph of potential, these are 9 areas that we identified. So all the people whom we have gone about running assessment centers on, we have, so this is what we have done. We have asked these 3 questions. We have identified the roles for which succession planning has to be done. We have then identified all the people who are aligned with these roles, right? And we have done the 2P mapping in terms of performance and potential mapping, and we have gone about collecting that data. And now let's say we have 10 people data, or 20 people data, or 50 people data, or 100 people data, and now we, depending on the data that we have gone about collecting, we are putting them in these brackets of low performer, low potential, or moderate performer or moderate potential, or high performer or high potential, or any other of other elements. This is what we are doing. We are placing people in here, right? Now, what we do here is that, now remember, when we talk about whom do we prepare for future roles, right? Then we look at 4 people who fall in 4 blocks to prepare for future roles, which means if it's a moderate performer and moderate potential, or a moderate performer or high potential, and a high performer and moderate potential, or a high performer and high potential, these are the people whom we need to prepare for future roles. Now, remember, when we are doing business continuity planning, when we are doing succession planning, it's important that, like just for example, when you do training, if you have to train 100 people, you don't train 100, you train 120, 20% more. Now, why do you do that? Because people quit, people leave, there are attrition rates, there are employee turnovers, and all that has to be taken care of. And if we have to take care of all this, then we have to ensure that we have more people in hand, right? So the same way, when you are doing succession planning, you do not only do for high performer, high potential. In fact, sometimes you may not have high performer, high potential also. But even if you have high performer, high potential, it's good to have these 4 quadrants where you do succession planning for, because other quadrants need some other input or some other kind of element which is needed. For example, somebody who is low potential and low on performance is a bad hire, and you need to replace it. That is important, right? When we talk about moderate potential and low performance, then the performance is low, the potential is moderate. Basically, you need to recheck why he is not being able to perform, and you need to improve in the current role itself, right? And even for a high potential and low end performance, there can be 2 elements to it. Either the person is misfit in the current role, so they need to reassign the person, or they need to improve the person in the current role through training or something else, right? When we talk about moderate performance but low potential, then we are talking about, again, improving in current role because the potential is low, right? Which technically means that though the performance is moderate right now, even if you move the person up the ladder, he may not be able to achieve the results for you because what is needed in that role, the potential is low, right? And similarly, when we talk about high performance and the performance is high, and this is the most tricky because we are talking about performance being high, right, and potential being low. But then what happens is, a lot of times, one or the other thing, like for example, a lot of team members who are exceptionally working well are not able to perform well as team leaders. A lot of players who are amazing in sports, in getting runs, scoring goals, when made captain of the team, are unable to perform, right? And that means that the performance is high, but at the same time, potential is low. So in those cases, there is one or the other things. For example, a lot of times in organization, we see technological compliances and how good they are with technology being one of the reasons, or maybe it can be many other reasons. So you need to reconsider that, right? Maybe you can redo the check again, or you can look at whether the person actually is there or not, or maybe you can carve a different path in terms of that, because you won't want to lose a person who is high in performance. But then finally, whom you prepare are these 4. which is moderate performance and moderate potential, which is high potential and moderate performance, or we are talking about high performance and moderate potential, or we are talking about high performance and high potential. These are the people whom we need to prepare for future roles when it comes to succession planning, right? Now, once we are done with this, so look at this, what we have gone about doing. We have section planning started with step one. Step one is asking critical questions. We have gone about asking 3 critical questions, and then we have identified which roles we need succession planning for, right? Once we have clear with these roles, we have looked at all the people who fall in line with these roles, and then we have done 2P. We have applied 2P rule on that. What is 2P rule? Performance and potential. We have looked at performance. We have understood what potential is. We have looked at performance management data. We have looked at potential data. We have looked at current performance data. And then we have gone about putting this in the 9 skill matrix that we are talking about, these 9 boxes that we are talking about, the 9 quadrant that we are talking about. And the 4 top quadrants is something that have been identified for future roles. So for example, when we conduct these MDPs, management development programs for organizations as part of CHRMP, then when we run this management development programs, we run it for a set of people because these have been identified as future leaders, but they're not leaders right now. They're future leaders for the organization. They have been identified, and everybody undergoes training, this rigorous training that happens over a period of time, or it may happen for a few days. But the idea is that they, when it comes to certain aspects, the preparing for future roles is being taken care. There may be other aspects on the job, etc., that they are also doing that because they want to bring more depth in terms of what who can fill in the gap in case of critical resources leave, right? Okay, wonderful. Now the last step after this is mapping key personnel with talent pool, right? So now we have identified key roles, and that key roles is nothing but key personnels. And when we are doing succession planning, we see people who are in line with this. And when we talk about people who are in line with this, then we map the key roles or the key personnel with talent pool, right? So if you look here, the key roles here are key personnel here are Ram, John, Krishna, and Veronica. And the talent pool here, we are talking about Sonali, Mohammed, Saurav, Sarah, and Peter. Now, when we talk about mapping this across, we are largely talking about, let's look at Ram. We are, we are talking about Sonali and Saurav and Peter in order of preference, being in line in terms of the succession planning. We are talking about John, where we have Sonali and Mohammed, which is in line with the succession planning. We are talking about Krishna, where we have Mohammed and Saurav, and Peter in line with the talent pool in order of preference of who would replace. And then when we talk about Veronica, we have only Sarah who can replace her, right? Which technically means that Ram and Krishna are quite safe in terms of having enough of talent pool behind them. But if you look at John, or especially if you look at Veronica, then we are talking about that we do not have enough number of people backing this up, which means even if we have done succession planning, still there is some amount of business continuity and course continuity that we need to think of, and probably we need to build more capacity for roles which are represented by these 2 roles, and especially the role of Veronica, which is extremely important, right? So this is how we go about doing succession planning. But then this becomes not a one-time affair because it has to constantly happen. And when we are talking about important roles in an organization, we are talking about employee churn, which is continuous in an organization. We are talking about employee turnover, which is continuous in an organization. When we talk about sometimes performance is not predictable, so people's performance change year on year. If so there may be various different reasons. So this succession planning in a fast changing, continuous, competitive environment needs not only a succession planning approach, it needs a succession development approach. It needs a succession development approach, right? Which technically means that if you have less number of people filling in, or if you otherwise you want to, there is uncertainties, it's always good to then have this as a continuous process. So succession planning can lead to succession development, which is nothing but succession planning and development. In fact, a lot of organizations have started calling it succession development or succession planning and development, because to stress on the point that it is not something which is one time, it is something which is continuous, that has to be driven by HR professionals for today, right? Apart from this, I think sometimes when you have close contests between people, points are too less, and sometimes when performance and potential data is not enough, you may also look at three other data to make better decisions, which is data on education, exposure, and experience. The 3E methodology is something that we go about using in terms of making better decisions, which is for intelligent succession planning. But remember, this whole aspect of identifying key roles, where to do it, applying to the 2P methodology, collecting data for performance and potential through various methodologies, putting it in the 9-module graph or 9-quadrant graph, and then identifying the top 4, and then mapping it to talent pool is a continuous process, not a one-time process. And succession planning has now become succession development, which is very, very important, right? So this is about succession planning, right? This is about succession planning. But as I said in the beginning of the webinar, that I would also be talking about future of human resource today, because I'm getting a lot of questions. A lot of people are coming, interacting with me on LinkedIn and other places, and talking to me in terms of where is it heading, and people are faring in terms of, and in fact, some people have already lost jobs to what we call as technology. So, you know, so it's important that all of you who are listening to me right now understand what is the future of human resource and what does the next 10 years look like. And nothing better than listening to this in the beginning of the year, isn't it, right? What is the future of human resource? I'll quickly do it, right? Because it's a big topic by itself, right? And uh, uh, it's something that we all as HR professionals should know, because if we know where things are heading, we can plan better, right? So 4 areas. So all the areas which are there, but 4 new areas of human resource and 4 future areas of human resource management which would evolve are workforce shaping, culture, employee experience, and data and analytics, right? So this is where future of HR is heading, right? Workforce shaping, culture, employee experience, and data and analytics. And let me quickly talk about each one of it in probably a minute, right? Now, when we talk about workforce shaping, largely it is being done by top-notch HRs. But when we talk about workforce shaping, how is it different from workforce planning? Because we have been hearing of manpower planning and workforce planning as terminologies all this while, but workforce shaping goes to a different level altogether. Now, understand what is happening in organizations today. Organizations know how are they going to implement technology in their respective departments and in their respective roles and designations, etc. Right? And they know that this change is not overnight, right? So it's not that suddenly AI and ML will come and take away the role, right? So they have a plan for 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years in terms of technology implementation. But every time technology implementation would happen, right? HR should be able to predict how exactly it's going to happen, what it's going to change, what roles will become redundant, and what new roles will be created. And they should be able to then plan and execute so that there is no manpower crisis and there is no issues in terms of running operations, right? So if manpower planning was largely about a quarter or a half year or a 1 year or let's say 2 year, we are talking about workforce shaping, right? Which is long term in terms of 3 years, 5 years, in fact, 8 years, 10 years as well, right? So today, as HR professionals, we would be able to foresee technological implementation in an organization and predict roles or new roles, old roles becoming redundant or whatever, and accordingly plan and ensure that we have enough number of people. And this would be done over a period of time, a very, very important, interesting area that's emerging in human resource. The next area is the area of culture, right? All this while culture was about embedding values that the organization feels uh, that it wants to drive it in its organization, right? And it was about transparency and about honesty and ethics and a lot of other things that organization wanted people to follow while being in the organization. But now culture is going to the next level, and this next level is about uh, culture identifying and defining uh, underlying behaviors and promoting underlying behaviors uh, which can get work done. And this is very, very important, guys, because if all this while culture was not about these elements, culture is now directly, would be in times to come, directly linked with how organizations would get work done, which would be a shift from the regular approach that organizations take, right? Which is very, very important. Yeah. The third would be about employee experience, right? So if employee engagement and employee relation was one bit, it would go to a different level where we are talking about employee experience. And when we talk about employee experience, we are talking about experience at three levels, right? Just how you, so basically this would follow customer centricity principles where organizations would consider um, employees as customers, and the same level of satisfaction that they aim at customers to achieve, they would aim at employees also to rate them on those skills, right? And this would largely revolve around on three elements, which is digital experience, social experience, and environmental experience, right? And this is would be a one big area where organizations would invest human resource energy on, right? And my favorite is data and analytics, right? Data and analytics has and is and will redefine how human resource is implemented in an organization. It would create workforce insights like never before. It would help organization departments roles make evidence-based database decisions. It would solve problems. It would in fact predict problems, would predict investments and the success levels, and raise the hand and show a red light when where it feels that. And this would all be not gut based but data based, right? So analytics would be a revolution in human resource. In fact, I would want you to check CHRMP's certification in HR analytics. uh, it's a wonderful certification, and people who are interested in analytics and who think that that is something that is one area it would really be, they would be learning really well. But this is something that is the future. We are talking about data and analysis, and this is where the world would be moving ahead. These four areas in human resource will become very, very important. Not only this, I think five essential skills that HRs need to learn, right? And all of you need to learn these skills, which is extremely important. And these five skills are HR and people analytics, which is very, very important. Not only that, design thinking and critical thinking is also extremely important, right? Extremely, extremely important, right? For example, one of the exercises we were doing the other day was about uh, see, we have always been told as kids to concentrate, right? Or otherwise also even as adults we have been told to concentrate on something, right? Concentrate, why don't you concentrate on studies, please concentrate on this, concentrate on this. So everyone has asked us to concentrate, but nobody has, rarely we have been told how to concentrate, right? The path is not shown, but the outcome is something that that is needed, isn't it? So critical thinking and design thinking allows you. I mean, these are two different skills actually, but if you look at critical thinking, it would help you to understand and get answers. I mean, this is a very small, maybe trivial example of what it may do, but even for looking at larger solutions that organizations are aiming at or wanting people to achieve, I think design thinking and critical thinking would be very, very important skills. And then you would have digital HR skills, which are extremely important. And then HRs would play a very, very important role. And if they were playing a role of an implementer all this while, now they would be playing a role of stakeholder manager, which technically means that they would negotiate with business in terms of achieving what the business wants, which means not necessarily an implementer role, but a partner's role. And if they have to go about doing it, then they have to be able to influence and handle stakeholders, which is very, very important, which was HRs were not doing it because largely they were implementing what business was telling them. So this is a new skill that they need to go about developing. And then again, there is strategic workforce planning, workforce shaping. That is something that they have to go about doing. So these are five skills that you are looking at HRs to have in the coming 5 to 10 years. And now the most interesting part is what would the future designations look like? So let me give you some examples of future designations. Some of them are already there. I mean, if you go to Googling some uh, these designations and the job descriptions, you would be able to go and read it. Please do that. We are talking about designations like HR data detective, work from home facilitator. Post pandemic, I think this would be one of the most needed job descriptions in terms of work from home facilitator, HR business continuity officer, chatbot and human facilitator. This would recruiters will uh, be removed by, I mean, the loss of jobs there would be filled by chatbot and human facilitator, but this would need specialized skills. We are talking about HR algorithm officer. We are talking about human network analyst. If you look at roles, we are talking about employee experience manager. These are roles we have not heard of actually, right? All this while we have just heard of recruitment and talent acquisition and employee engagement and performance management and compensation benefit or payroll. But look at these designations: workforce environment architect, director of well-being, employee enablement coach, genetic diversity officer, VR immersion counselor in the L&D department, right? So look at this, where the world is heading. Forget the world, where the HR department is heading, right? These are the designations that we had not heard of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years back, or maybe before this webinar, isn't it? Right? But this is where the world is heading, right? And when we talk about these elements, I think it's very, very important for us to understand and ask a question. And the real question to ask here is, uh, how prepared are you for the future, right? How prepared are you for the future? Because largely, if we go about seeing, all of us are too much involved in what's happening right now, right? And when we talk about what's happening right now, I think it's good to know what's happening right now, because it sets the base for us. If all of you are practicing HR or looking at getting into HR, then certainly I think uh, 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 you know what is being done in different organizations. But to also foresee because if you would not foresee, and you will take time, uh, you understand that this question is very important to answer in terms of how prepared you are for the future, right? And not only that, I think what is also very important for all of us to understand is that uh, uh, the current academics doesn't have the reach that would help you achieve this, right? Because look at what happened about a book being written. One of my favorite books, in fact, I was a university topper in that, by Stephen P. Robbins. It's still being taught. And it was written in 1983. 1983. Millennials were not there then. You have millennials and Gen Z on the reality. It's good to know that, and or if you know, understand the application at least, right? So, what we need in terms of preparing for future is something that follows research methodology, not academic methodology, right? And research methodology is about following cases that's happening right now in the industry, and uh, goes about building curriculums around that to prepare us for future, right? And for this, I think I have something which is our certification of CHRMP in called HRBP Advanced, Human Resource Business Partner Advanced. Very, very well drafted, well done certification. It has topics of job analysis in terms of creating job descriptions, job specifications, to competency mapping. Remember, I was talking about departments being called learning and development and talent acquisition, not recruitment and selection anymore. Why? Right? How competency matrices are done, how indicators are written, how competency mapping is done, how how models are chosen, how HR professional systems are created and implemented in organizations, right? And then we are talking about talent acquisition, where we are talking about strategic planning and workforce staffing is something that you go about learning. You learn creating selection design tests, probably something that computers can't do, because design is something that you have to create and feed in, isn't it? So something that you go about learning in here, very, very important. You learn the art of behavioral event interviewing, not traditional interviewing, not tell me about yourself, why should we hire you, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? These are rubbish questions. I mean, answers are there everywhere, right? People can just mug it up and just blabber it out, right? If you just somebody's creativity, if you just somebody's innovation, what questions to ask, and how do you evaluate it, how do you create that funnel, right? Very, very important aspects that you go about learning in here. We are talking about managing and appraising performance. I talked a bit on that, how exactly all of it is done, calculated, computed, KPI set, important aspect in terms of learning, human resource management, learning and development, one of my most favorite topics. Look at what you learn here. You learn triangulation, you learn codes, you learn blooms, you learn ADDIE, you learn Kirkpatrick L1, L2, L3, L4. You learn a lot of things that would help you learn the whole idea of talent development or learning and development. You learn employee engagement, offer rates, absenteeism rates, attrition rates, uh, uh, employee surveys, exit interviews, all that, how exactly you go about planning, implementing is something that you go about learning. You have compensation benefit planning, again, one of my favorite topics, individual equity, external equity, internal equity, how salary slabs are created, how points are assigned, how competency mapping gets aligned with compensation planning, how you go about populating entire pay grades and create pay parity in organization. Very, very important for us to understand this, right? A perfect balance between strategy and application is something that you go about learning, creating vision, mission of organizations, creating policies, classifying them, structuring them, upgrading them. All that is something that you learn here. And then you learn what we call as HR operations, where you learn all the bit of personal management with right from offer letters to appointment letters to bonds, contracts, background verification, joining formalities, leave management, everything that you need to know is something that is taught there and taught in aspects of how things are working and changing right now in the industry. I think a very, very important mid-step milestone in terms of your journey for preparation for future, because if you do not understand concepts of competency, if you do not understand the new age L&D principles, employee engagement principles, talent acquisition principles, then when it would change, then it would be double effort in terms of you catching up, right? So we are talking about a course which bridges this gap and makes you move much faster, much forward for you to be able to achieve it, which is very, very important. And the way you go about learning this is not by only pre-recorded sessions that you just get a login ID and then you watch pre-recorded sessions. You have pre-recorded sessions, which is loaded with information, with quizzes, with presentations, with assignments. But what also you get is expert-led sessions every Saturday, what we call is ICP in-class project sessions that you go about getting. And this is something that is a game changer because you interact with experts and you know about all these 10, 12 topics, and then you know how exactly to go about doing that. So it's a mix of self-paced and uh, 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 expert-led modules, which makes the whole approach blended and very, very powerful in terms of learning experience and learning retention, which is very, very important. And we are talking about 4K videos. We are talking about this whole structure that I would show you in a bit. Look at what Mukund Ganpati, who's working with Amazon, has to talk about CHRMP certifications. Or if you look at Joanna, who's working with the United Nations, all are CHRMP alumni, proud CHRMP alumni who are who have learned, who have understood what and have grown their careers in human resources, right? You have this wonderful validation that you go about doing. The certification is from CHRMP and PSN View. You get blockchain verified digital badge. You link it to your LinkedIn, get 25% more visibility. You're talking about a certificate of achievement with a unique certification code, something that we go about maintaining. So if you look at this is what the CHRMP membership would look like. You have your dashboard, your activity feed, your courses, your events. So if you go to your courses, you will be able to access all that's there and all that's upcoming. For example, you have courses on, I mean, I have a master login, so I have all the courses, but advanced would have number of courses in here. For example, CNB, career planning, L&D, operations, HR policies, all that I've talked about, all of that would be there. You can go about clicking and learning out of here. You can continue, as I said, with your self-paced learning modules that you can keep on learning. But at the same time, you can also go about, so I've just finished a video and now there is a quiz, so I can go about giving quizzes here, and I can go about doing that. I can start quiz and I can do that, and once I finish the quiz, I can go and watch videos again. It's something that I can do, right? This is a module on behavioral interviewing. Imagine that I tell you. Right, so you have this, and then you have quizzes, and not only that, you have other elements as well, and then you have these deep dive sessions, which is upcoming sessions that you want to go about learning. The previous sessions recordings are all here. For example, tomorrow is a competency mapping deep dive. People, you can go about registering from here, and just like how you are attending this webinar on Zoom, you can attend these sessions on Zoom by experts. That is something that you can go about doing. That international participant can convert in their own timeline. You can all do that. But not only that, you have something called Resource Hub, which is like encyclopedia of human resource. With membership, you have access to this. You have topics like all that you need to know in terms of look at the kind of topics, and this just keeps on growing, right? So we have experts who have come and done various sessions. So all the session recordings from July is available to you. And then you have HR operations and job analysis and communication and competency and leadership and performance and tech and templates and talent acquisition and employee experience and digital HR. All that you need to know is something that is there. We keep doing events from time to time. You can go registering yourself for these events. We have forums that are there. You can become parts of forum. You can connect with other HR members. You can do all of it, right? You can do all of it by becoming an Academy member.